Hey, good day, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of Unsung Heroes of the Cloud, where we have a special treat for you today. We have a special guest here today, Tom Kerkhove, from the far, far west of Belgium, and he is going to discuss event grids with us today. And Tom, finally, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much. Nice for having me.
Yes, and we are excited to have you because I remember even before we did our first episode and Mike and I were just tweeting about the unsung heroes, you chimed in with event grid needs to be discussed.
Yes, without a doubt.
It took you a while, man.
Wow.
You need to push more pressure in there. Oh, that's below the belt.
No, I think it's truly one of the hidden gems in Azure, not only for customers, but also for other Azure services. So I'm happy that we have the time here to discuss Event Grid. It's truly great.
That's true.
Cool.
That's true. Cannot agree more.
Before we get to the tech, Mike and I like to just chat a little bit with our guests before we jump into the meat and potatoes. So outside of tech and outside of open source, what do you like to do, Tom?
If there would be any free time after open source, I would be watching a movie in the theater or play some board games or go to a festival or a concert.
Okay,
that would be it, I think.
Yeah. How are the movie theaters right now in Belgium? Are they back open?
Yeah, they're back open, and I just read that James Bond was the biggest one this year.
Yep.
And also next year, it was the biggest opening movie in September in all time, I think.
Yeah, indeed. You're absolutely right. The numbers. Craig is doing really, really well, and it's well received everywhere. So yeah, in Belgium, it's really like it opened last week, Wednesday, and it was like, woo, box office galore. Really cool.
It released on, I think it's the 30th of September. And it's the biggest release in September. So that's just in a couple of days, they nailed everything.
Okay, wow, that's fantastic.
I don't know if it's because James Bond or it's one of the bigger blockbusters since everything is going back to normal. I don't know.
I think it has to do with Bond and Craig because it's his last and it's the final act of his series of James Bonds, because there's a red line in there, right? I mean, we know that there's a storyline, so yeah. Looking forward to seeing it, actually. And you said something about board games?
Yeah.
You still have time for those? I mean, you have a Git, you have open source, you have ranting on Event Grid. I mean,
that's one of my two money drains. Vinyls or board games. I could show you.
Ooh, all right.
Wow, that's a nice collection. And what's your go-to board games for people who want to get into it? Like, what's your gateway drug?
I would say something like Ticket to Ride or something. It's something for the family. There's other ones if you really want to go and spend a couple of hours. You can go with Sulkin and blow your brains. That's a less easy one. It all depends what you want to do. Exploding Kittens is also fun, but more a party game.
That definitely is a party game. But why don't we jump into the tech? Because you wanted to talk about Event Grid. So why should we all care about Event Grid?
Event Grid allows you to decouple applications and make sure that just by opening it up and send events, later on you can hook into those same events. And extend your application without having to change the other components. So you're decoupling your platform, basically. Now,
Okay.
you can be one of the publishers, but Azure is also one of them, and I think that's the biggest point of EventGrid. It truly is at the heart of Azure, where I would love to say all Azure services, but some Azure services really notify you when things go on, and then you can even extend your Azure resources. And the go-to example that I always use is Azure Key Vault, where you're storing secrets, you're storing certificates, certificates expire, and secrets get rotated. And with EventGrid, you get notifications for all of that, like your certificate is about to expire. Your certificate has expired. Now, by them simply emitting those events, you can really hook into that, automatically issue new certificates, update them in Key Vault, and nobody even notices. And that's a bit the sad part. We still see outages where the certificates are expired and they take whole NuGet down, or I don't know which service it was last year, but it was also due to certificate expired. And I'm like, guys, you have EventGrid, just embrace it. Just fire a simple PowerShell-based function that does the rotation and you're done with it. So that's really the true power. And it's not only us as end users who can use this, but also other services in Azure can rely on this. Like I think API management uses Key Vault certificates, app services does, so they also hook into those events. But just by opening this up, you can really build a tight ecosystem and have all these automations out of the box. And as we can see here on the left, you typically have event sources, which are the publishers. They publish to EventGrid, and then you can use a variety of these event handlers. You can trigger a function, you can queue it on the service bus, on the storage queue, event hubs. If you prefer asynchronous processing, you can use logic apps, but you can also use hybrid connections and webhooks, so you can trigger anything. Now, the beauty is, go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, as you mentioned Service Bus and Event Hubs here as well. How is EventGrid different from, let's say, a traditional Service Bus or even an Event Hub?
Yep. So those that are interested, there's a link at the bottom that explain all of this, and Clemens Faster also has great talks to them. But it all depends on the mechanics that you want. For example, a Service Bus queue is durable and it is pull-based. You need to proactively say, give me the next message. Same with Event Hubs. And if you go to EventGrid, it is push-based. It is HTTP-based. And while they do retries, it's not the same as a queue. So that's good to understand what the mechanics are of every service. They're not competing. They just solve different needs. Like Event Hubs is still the high scale event processing. You could do the same with EventGrid, but you cannot go back in history. While with Event Hubs, you can do that. Now, one of the important things that I didn't mention is that all events have event types. So you as a subscriber can also really filter. And that is super powerful. You could say, I want to filter on event type, such as certificate about to expire, but you can also filter based on the data in the payload, who's emitting it, and all this kind of information. So just by publishing once to EventGrid, various parties can really reduce the fire hose and just use what they need.
Yeah. That's indeed pretty cool. Is it still the fact that it's still a full extension on blob storage? Because this used to be in the beginning, that they just hooked it in immediately. Is it still the case?
Do you mean that if you upload a blob, it fires an event, or?
No, I mean, there's when I first saw the presentation on EventGrid, our dear friend Dan then showed something that actually EventGrid was totally based on storage, and that it actually was an intrinsic part of the storage layer, and that they just hooked it in there instead of just being an event source only.
That I don't know. I think it's Service Fabric based. I don't know. I don't know the internals, but blob storage was one of the first services
Yeah.
to embrace it. That's for sure. And it's also supporting cloud events as a specification, so you can go with the Event Grid native schema, which is proprietary or cloud events for that interoperability. Now, if you just think about webhooks, if you need to build webhooks into your platform, what do you typically have to do? You need to do the bookkeeping. Who do I need to notify, in which case, send the payload, and all of that. You come with your own proprietary schema. Well, instead, what you can also do is you just fire your webhook once as an event, and then you create handlers per customer, and basically Event Grid does the bookkeeping for you. You delegate that away. They do the authentication, verification, etc. Now, if we have a look at the various types of Event Grid, because there are 4 different types, there's also something called Event Grid Domains, which really is a multi-tenant event broker. So just to go over all of them, system topics is what I explained. So those are the Azure services emitting these events so that you can extend your resources. And then the more recently ones are the partner topics. So they are practically the same, but not native to Azure. Auth0 is a good example where they emit tens or hundreds of events. For example, user had it, password reset, whatever. They emit events for you if you link them to your Azure subscription, which is really powerful. Because if there's a new user being onboarded in your company, you can really automate the whole process. Automatically add them to all the teams they need, add them to DevOps, whatever, fully automatable. Then the custom topics is if you as a customer want to emit events for your own platform, and then event domains is the custom topics, but really tailored for multi-tenant scenarios, where based on the key, it automatically routes it to the correct tenant when you have to worry about this. It's actually topics within topics to blow your brains.
Inception all over the place.
Yeah. But it's super fast, but it needs to work with your scenarios. And I think the more Azure services that we have that adopt this, it really helps us automate things.
Yeah, actually, every service can benefit from this, right? I mean, I don't see the
agree.
reason why they shouldn't be doing this. I mean, looking from
let's not go there.
Well, I do have one question for you, Tom, on custom topics and domains. How do I push an event into Event Grid?
Yeah, so you can use an API key or AD authentication. And just by doing that authentication, you simply push the Event Grid payload or a cloud event, and it gets added to the whole topic, and then everybody subscribing will get it if it matches their filter criteria.
And then the method of connecting to Event Grid is just a REST API call, I suppose?
You can use the client SDKs, you can use REST API, you can practically use anything.
And Tom, quick question for you. Are you open to taking live questions?
Yes.
Yeah, our dear friend Sean.
Around.
So there was a comment, and I don't know if it's a comment or a question, and I'll let you elaborate, Tom, but Sean said one of the confusing sides of the topics was understanding the constraints each has when it came to the number of subscriptions.
I think he's referring maybe to the resource limits. That might be different, because I think domains has bigger throughput than custom topics, but I'm not sure. Okay. I haven't used domains in production yet.
Okay, but you have used other elements of Event Grid in production already?
Yeah. So I use the custom topics practically on any project that I have. And system topics, for example, I always subscribe to secret rotated because I cache secrets in memory on every instance. And then I have an asynchronous cache invalidation through Event Grid, which queues it. And then I have a background job on every API to pick it up and validate the cache, because Azure Key Vault has the ridiculous limitations of 2,000 secret operations per 10 seconds, which might sound a lot, but if you're running a couple of instances, then that can be very few.
Limited,
yeah,
indeed.
And I found that works fine. It's in a .NET library. If you're interested, people can use it. I'll paste the link in the chat.
Okay.
And so for those system topics you discussed, is there like an extensive list of which services support EventGrid and which potentially don't?
Yeah, so it is in the documentation. We also have it here. If Mike clicks, thank you very much. So these are all the Azure services that have it today, either in GA or support. And if you are missing the service that you would like to see, please do ask the teams. Please do add them to Sean's Azure event wishlist, because we try to use this to convince product groups to incorporate them. But yeah, also in the documentation, you'll find a page per service with all the event types and all the payloads to elaborate on the scenario. So the documentation on them is actually fairly good.
Okay. And I seem to remember, and you might be able to elaborate, that you also built an open source solution to link Kubernetes events into EventGrid. Is that right?
Yeah, so I created Kubernetes EventGrid Bridge. I'll pull up the link. Basically, you need to deploy it in your cluster along with Kubernetes Event Exporter. And it basically brings all the Kubernetes data plane events, so the Kubernetes native events outside of your cluster, which allows you to do really a lot of things. What we do is we subscribe for deployment scaled out, scaled in, cluster scaled out, scaled in, so that we can visualize this. We get notifications in Teams and all of that, but also imagine pods are constantly restarting. You can now subscribe to these events rather than relying on metrics that have a delay. This is what I have created. So it's open source, it's free. And it works pretty well. Obviously, I'm biased, but if you go to the walkthroughs, people that are interested can just follow the guide to have it up and running. And also, if you're using .NET, there's a NuGet package with the contracts of the events that are being emitted.
That's pretty straightforward stuff.
Yeah, I also did the same for Azure Monitor Autoscale, because they send you webhooks, but not EventGrid events. So what I did is just created a small logic app that takes the payload, I shove it in a cloud event, and I send it to your custom topic, because I also use that same auto-scaling pipeline to visualize it, to notify people for every scaling action.
Did you open source that too?
Yes, it's if you go to Azure-Toolbox, Azure-Autoscale-Toolbox.cloud, you can find it there.
Box.cloud. My typing isn't.
If we would want
Azure-Autoscale-Toolbox.
Yeah. Can you put HTTPS explicitly in front?
Okay.
It's just one of those. I have 15 minutes. What?
Maybe I made a mistake in typing. It's Azure-Autoscale-Toolbox.cloud, right?
Yes. It works on my machine from the far west.
All right. Maybe I just made a.
Okay. Maybe
weird.
It's not supporting.
No, it's okay. No, it's okay. I got it. There we go.
So if you go to observability, there's a link there. Now, Sean is asking about EventGrid and Cosmos. Damn you, Sean. It's not supported. I would love to, but they typically recommend, if you want to get notified, plug in the change feed with an Azure function. You can get the same info, and that's fine for me. But ideally, I'm not the one doing all the compute. But yet somebody has to pay for it, I guess. But I would love to have it even if it's a paid feature, because then it's less work for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. That really makes sense. All right, cool. What else do we have here?
Yeah, so a question I get a lot is from product groups is, why do you need event grid? What is event grid even sometimes? So then I start with a facepalm and then I say, it's different from, and these are the typical replies. So diagnostic logs also give you a lot of information, but it's not event driven. You need to plow through a lot of data, which is not that straightforward. Same applies to change feed, actually. You need to have that dedicated compute to process it. You cannot be stateless and it's not standardized. Then other things are metrics. They are great, but they are mainly for visualizing and alerting. And they also come with a delay of, let's say, 5 to 10 minutes in Azure Monitor. So implicitly, that same delay is there for alerts. And alerts also just say, alert XYZ has fired, but you don't have that contextual information that an event does. So if you would have secret rotated, it would have the name of the secret, name of the vault, and you can just use that. An alert doesn't have that. Some services do have webhooks, which is then the closest thing to event grid. But then you also have to filter through all the webhooks. Through all the webhook information, and there's no filter model, there's no standardization, etc. And this is also a bit similar to the Kubernetes events. You need to drink from the fire hose, and even Kubernetes is worse because it doesn't have a type. So you need to really interpret and be a Kubernetes event expert to understand what's going on, because all you have is a message, and then you need to know what that message represents. So that's, those are the typical replies. And again, as event grid should be the central place of Azure and should be the heart, and everything should go through event grid, in my opinion. So you can really automate a lot.
If you have one service that you really would like to see event grids finally be onboarded to, which one would it be?
That's a very good question. I would say a non-Azure service, meaning there's so many things just in Azure as such. Let's say deprecations, incidents, the more of the governance pieces, which are also important, and those are very hard. Deprecations is a mess.
Yeah, but that's something you already tried to cover, right?
Actually, you can subscribe to these events already.
Events,
yes. But
because
preferably,
I'm
not the one. I'm not the one doing it. But imagine just we have service health. Service health has activity alerts. Fine, you can use that now. But why is this not an event grid event? I can filter based on if it's A, then I could still fire an alert, but I can also automatically create a ticket in this system. I can post to Teams, etc. by having multiple subscriptions. It's possible. It just feels more natural to use that pops up approach rather than creating multiple action groups. It's a bit, it works, but it feels a bit abusing. And that's the one example I would maybe give. There's so many things. If you just go to the list on Sean's repo.
You want me? The wish list. If you want me to open that, I mean, you get a couple of hours. We just try to open this for you and bring it out to the world.
I think if I have to pick one, that's Azure AD, because Azure AD, just by simply emitting events, they would have a major impact. For example, just there's a new user onboarded would be major. If a user gets deleted, that's even more important.
Yeah.
For like offboarding, we use GitHub at Coldit. We're now rolling out AD integration. But in theory, if you don't have AD integration now, a human has to go there, remove the user if somebody's thinking about it. But if you would have that event, just shove a logic app in the middle and it's done. There's a GitHub connector. Just remove that user and you're done. Onboarding new people, automatically add them to the AD groups and all of that. Oh no, I think that's outdated.
So there's quick, there's some events here really for the, AD is really showing up. Really makes sense. Yeah.
You're passing by my favorite one. Can you go up?
Which one?
A little bit more there. Number 23. AD app hotkeys rotated. AD app hotkey expiring. This would be major. I always set expire never because I'll forget about it. But if you have it out of the box, they can really do it for me.
That would also improve security for a lot of applications.
Yes.
That's
is it storage accounts? Yeah, I think storage accounts now have auto rotation built in. You have to pay a little bit more. But they then do that for you.
Okay. We know a storage PM.
Yes, we do.
If you're listening.
Data Factory is also an interesting one. I actually once worked with a customer where we rolled out event-driven data processing.
Yeah.
And we basically changed data pipelines and machine learning and all of that just by emitting the events ourselves. But if you would have that start, stopped, failed, you could do that out of the box. You
could automate a lot more. That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Would make a lot of sense. IoT edge storage keys. This one would indeed be a very useful one. Yeah, there's a lot.
IoT Hub also has a couple of good ones already today. Like I think it's device added, device removed, and some other things. So they really get the power.
Mm-hmm. Azure files. Yeah, there's really there's like a gazillion of use cases that we're totally missing out on, or actually you don't realize that you need them. Once you start looking at this list. Yeah.
Then they ask, what events do you want to have? I'm like, give me everything, because it really depends on the information that they give to people that you can really think about the scenarios.
Yeah. I would love to see some event grid love for GitHub too, to be honest. I can imagine some use cases there too.
Let's say that I'm trying to have them as a partner topic.
Yeah. Because everything which is in relation to changes into the security landscape and all those things, and the other thing.
Let's say that if there's a security advisory open on the repo, the admin might want to know if somebody's added to an organization. Like they already have the whole audit log, but
nobody's doing something with it. That's true. Yeah. And then they probably go like, use GitHub Actions for that.
Probably.
Probably. But this one is a good one too. Cost and management and billing. Yeah. New invoices and budget limit. This one really can be a lifesaver.
You get the email. I don't know if you can actually have an endpoint be triggered, but that would be super helpful.
That would be indeed super helpful. Cool. Yeah. All right. Cool. Yeah, I saw that you still had some use cases that you, but I think we kind of discussed them all.
Yeah.
Except for that really one, go fully bananas.
No, that's what I was just mentioning. The more events you have, more interesting scenarios will pop up. It's not something you really can define. You can define some scenarios up front, but you really need to have the tools there to see what inspiration it will trigger.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing this.
My pleasure.
I have used Event Grid a little myself, but not as much in depth as you, Tom. And I have to say, I I learned a thing or two today. So thank you for coming on.
Then I'm happy. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it was really fun seeing you here. And this is indeed one of the first topics that were called out loud. That's an unsung hero. Bring it to us. And there you have it. Tom Kerkhove bringing us a really quiet unsung hero, Event Grid, because as Tom mentioned a couple of times, not enough services are using it. Start implementing. And yeah, we should be being a little bit more considerate about Event Grid when it comes down to helping us out in daily governance and management.
It's easy to complain, but I'm always happy to help people. Give inputs, think about scenarios, and how it can help customers as well.
Yep. Cool. Well, with that, Tom, thanks for coming on. For the people who are still watching us, and Sean in the chat, thanks for joining us today. And we'll see you again in about 2 weeks' time with the next hero. See you, everybody.
Yep. Bye all. Take care. Stay safe. Bye-bye.